Testing audio. Testing audio. Hello. Oh, no worries. Thanks for typing a message. My Ricky Ricordo's awfully big. I think I might knock him down a notch. Just a moment. All right. That's better.
Hi, guys.
Hey, welcome, Jimmy, and good to see you, Carl.
Hello.
I'm going to step to the side just for a second. You did? Oh, I was wondering that 2 weeks in a row. Hopefully not because you were under the weather.
Yeah, just
3 weeks
bit,
in a
honestly,
row.
but it's been dead at work, and it's a long drive and a long shift, so I said screw it.
Oh, cool. Well, it's nice to prioritize the self.
Yeah, every now and again I feel justified.
I'm going to go on mute for just a second. I want to get my water squared up here.
Oh, Cloud. I know you're muted, but I saw that you said not going to be doing the Discord stream. Does that mean Ruth's not going to be here? Well, I guess she normally does. You do the YouTube, I don't even know. I don't know about anybody else, but I just finished this chapter like 10 minutes ago. Behind.
I started this chapter today and life got in the way, so I'm not fully read on it. But it seemed fascinating.
Oh, here's Haya. Hello. Are you way over there?
Mice in the room? Whoa.
They're not mice.
Use.
Here we go. It's supposed to be
Hi, everybody.
like a fetus.
My thigh.
What it's supposed to be more evocative of.
Oh, goodness.
Nice. Oh, nice.
Like an embryo. That's the term I was looking for.
Wow. Well, that's quite an answer also. Sky, were you able to get everything set up? Is it working?
I have the YouTube going. I don't believe I have the permissions to get into the stage and share on Discord, so I was wondering if
I'll get that done.
do you want to just do the YouTubes? I didn't want to put you like right on the spot to be tech support, so we could just do the YouTube. Okay.
I can probably stream to Discord and you do YouTube, and we'll have it covered between us both. And sorry about that.
Oh, no, not at all. It was, you made it really easy to get the YouTube going, so thanks for that.
Okay. So, yep, we'll get that started, but why don't you jump in?
Okay, great. Well, welcome also, and welcome, Bonnie. Good to see everybody. So, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Let's jump straight in. So, welcome to another book review event of The Body Keeps the Score, jumping into chapter 6. And, I'd like to start out with a gratitude, expressing gratitude for your presence and your time. This is becoming a really super meaningful VR event to me because as I shared earlier in the series, I read up to about chapter 4 or 5 maybe, and this was about like 10 years ago. And I sort of just got like an introduction to the concepts, which was enough to like get me started. It got me where like I needed to be at that time. But I always wanted to come back and I always wanted to really read the whole thing. But to be able to get to read it with all of you like that, I didn't expect how awesome that was going to turn out. So thanks again for your time and your commitment and your feedback and your shares. It's just really great. And our objective here is to be like a peer-to-peer, learning group and exploration, kind of bringing out our inner wellness warriors, encouragement, but to, go through some of our norms. We just want to make sure that, we talk about a lot of therapeutic concepts here, but it's not a replacement for therapy. You really want to confer with professional help and assistance if you go down a recovery path. We're just sharing little nuggets of wisdom that work for us and, being encouraging, but, nothing to replace therapy. And, along those lines, let's try not to fix or advise anyone, unless they ask for feedback. I'm having this experience. I'd really love feedback from the group. That would be great. And I and you statement hygiene, when we get into states of vulnerability, like sharing personal experiences, when we engage in conversation, if you use the you statement, that can kind of feel judgmental sometimes. So it's nice to soften it with expressions like, I think what I heard you say, or I feel I might have heard this from you. And those are good practices for sensitive discussions. We're going to keep things confidential. Just keep in mind that we are streaming, so anybody in the streaming audience and on YouTube will catch the conversation. But we're not here to like collect gossip. We're not going to go to the Sunset Bar and say like, "Oh my goodness, did you hear what came up in The Body Keeps the Score?" That's not what we're here for. So I hope this is a comfortable, safe place for people to bring their expressions and opinions. We have a raised hand utility for, some kind of like structured type of discussion. We're a pretty intimate group here, so please don't feel nervous about just speaking up if something comes up. But to kind of create space for people to share and, make sure the microphone passes around to everybody that would like to say something. Put a hand raise up so that we know that you're holding a comment, and I'll come around to you. And as always, we're welcome to give feedback if someone expresses the desire for it. And also, we have the Discord up on the screen over there to your left. And if there's any type of like weekly discussions, or you have provocative questions you'd like to hit the group with, or anything of that sort, we have like an ongoing thread in the Bridgemakers Discord to discuss that. So feel free to join in on the conversation there. You can also sign up for reminders, like the weekly event reminders. There's a little utility. So let's dive into some of this week's concepts. This chapter is going to be about the mind-body disconnection that can happen with traumatic experiences. If you carry, unreconciled traumas or unprocessed traumas, it can really interrupt the synchronicity that we've been talking about, all these different organs and the parts of our brain sending signals back and forth and staying in touch and aware of your environment. As the first 5 chapters shown, there's components of the brain that sort of control our awareness of our surroundings and our threat assessment of those surroundings. And if that gets out of whack, it can really interrupt, how our body perceives things. So chapter 6 is a really in-depth chapter about, how that kind of affects your moment-to-moment experience and, how your body and mind communicate together as a result. And we go, as Dr. Vanderkolk normally does, he gets kind of straight to the point. And we start off with the concept of self-injury or self-harming, where he treated a young lady by the name of Sherry, who couldn't stop picking at her arms and creating actual injuries and scars. And, this was obviously a behavior that was concerning to Sherry and anybody that, knew her. And she was seeking help and eventually got to see Dr. Vanderkolk for treatment. And, before we cast judgment, because a lot like the concepts of suicide, self-harm can come with a lot of questions. If you haven't gone through an experience in life that's taken you to the limits of your endurance, it's difficult to understand why someone would have thoughts of harming themselves or even, going so far as to really totally check out. But it's really important to reserve judgment because the science shows that there's a process of getting kind of worn down to that point where these types of things become scientifically explainable. They're normal human behavior given the circumstances of what that person has been through. So when we judge or shame, it really adds to the pile of, that's laying on top of somebody who's already knocked all the way down. So, when we see these scars or when we hear people share very vulnerable stories of, thoughts of suicidal thoughts and self-injury, let's be really sensitive to that and how can we not make the problem more difficult for somebody who's already struggling. And what I was hoping that we could show in chapter 5 is sort of the mechanics of how does a person get to the point where this behavior sort of becomes an option. And here's some of the tidbits for Sherry's personal experience, which was she was raised in a foster home. And if you can imagine the scenario where you have a single parent that is running a foster process like out of their own home, and you're the child of that parent, if you constantly have like 5 to 6 other individuals in your home that are coming from, likely other generational traumas, due to abandonment or extreme loss or, behavioral things that need to be treated. And there's kind of this revolving door of that situation that you're growing up with. Like your formative years are surrounded by this environment. And to make matters worse, she was verbally degraded by her parent. So the one person that you can hopefully depend on to protect you in all situations was telling her things like, I don't even think you're mine. I think somebody switched you at birth. And, that kind of took a toll and felt really isolating. And, obviously learned that trauma-informed behavior of, putting others' needs ahead of you, because even your own parent minimized your importance. So in adulthood, this affected her to the point where she got kidnapped on a vacation. And when she finally, had come to her senses and had the wherewithal to escape the situation, she did a collect call to her mom, and her mom denied the call. So, when we see these scars, it's visible evidence that somebody's been through some unspeakable things. And, to make matters worse, when she first reached out for help, the counseling, the psychiatrist that saw her first said, I'm not willing to treat you unless you promise to stop harming yourself. Which, that's a non-starter, right? Like, imagine you're carrying all this shame of this behavior, and you finally are brave enough to ask for help, and somebody just basically says, stop doing it. So, it's wonderful to think that she finally, and this is a great testament for not giving up. Like, finding help is kind of like dating. You sort of have to keep trying until you find a good fit. And eventually she found Dr. Vanderkolk. And I love, Carl, your comment there, your typed comment. I'll treat your depression, just promise to be happy. It's upside down, right? You have a lot of things to process and learn before you can just flick the switch. And if you ever encounter a counselor that has that type of intro, keep looking. Trauma can get to the point where it can interrupt your mind and body connection to the point that people almost lose all feeling in certain parts of their body. Dr. Vanderkolk in the book was given an example that he brought in a massage therapist expert, somebody skilled not only in massage, but in trauma and traumatic effects on the body. And when the massage began, the masseuse was working on the foot area, and Sherry asked, when is the massage going to start? And that's because she had lost so much ability and awareness to keep track of what was happening in her body, that she didn't have the sensations to really pick up that the massage had started. And Dr. Vanderkolk also did some additional studies where he gave people a physical object that had been through extreme traumas, and they really struggled to guess like what they were holding in their hand if they were blindfolded. So this is kind of like one of the outcomes, and we go into a little bit more of the mechanics of how this desynchronization occurs over time. So this was one of the studies where this really kind of important question came up in the group that Dr. Vanderkolk was with, and they said, we studied all of these brain imaging scans while people were reliving their trauma, but we've never scanned them, for their baseline. Like, what happens when they're not, when they're just thinking about making a cup of coffee or something. So they went ahead with that study, and they got, two groups, one that had experienced trauma and one that hadn't. And they found that in an idle state, the traumatized brain was actually operating very differently than the baseline people who hadn't experienced trauma. And the people with PTSD showed great reduction in the brain functions that manage touch and also emotion. But also the part of the brain that sort of is like a GPS, like that keeps an awareness of where you are in physical space and in relation to other objects. So almost like you lose like this presence awareness of, being in a room and, how far away the wall is from you. That process was really interrupted. And this is an interesting thing, too, because a lot of times our words, if you follow the meanings of our words that we describe feelings with, they sort of have a connection to these findings, right? Like, people often say they feel lost. Like, I have lost my way. And it's interesting to look at the brain scan now and find that, PTSD patients, just in a normal brain state where they're not triggered and they're not experiencing, remembered difficulties, this part of your brain that processes where you are in physical space is compromised. It's just very interesting the way this information is coming up. So, Dr. Vanderkolk went on to say, like, trauma can get severe enough, and I mean, this is unimaginable types of trauma. Not your run-of-the-mill difficult childhood, but you can imagine this level of trauma. People can get to the point where they can't recognize their own image in a mirror. So you can imagine the impact that must be having on that person's brain function. And another aspect of our mind and body connection is one of Dr. Vanderkolk's colleagues by the name of Damasio. He has this theory called the screen, or Damasio's screen. And basically, our brain uses this screen to sort of dampen or even hide feedback. So you can imagine, like, all of the sensory information that's coming in to our bodies right now. The temperature, am I hungry, sounds, smells, like, I really haven't checked in with my nose, since the event probably started. I don't really know what this room smells like. I'm actively smelling it, but I'm not aware, of, okay, what does the room smell like? Is it different than normal? Is it telling me anything? This is kind of Damasio's screen, right? Like, my olfactory senses are like behind the screen right now. It's not really important to my current situation, so I'm not actively processing it. I'm not reacting to it. And this is an ability that our brain and body connection has that Damasio calls the proto-self, which is wordless knowledge. And that's hard for me because I sort of think in words. My thought process tends to go like in a sentence structure. But I know people that have a completely different thought process, which is like they almost can't describe what they're thinking because their thought process isn't word-based. And that's very proto-self. Like, the knowledge that you're cold, you understand that you're cold before it gets to the point that you can put a word to it. Hungry or need the bathroom. These are mind-body connection, sensory, reactionary information that happens before you really can, have the need to put a word to it. And an example of that is like if you're ever bringing groceries in, from the car, or maybe you walked to the grocery store and you're carrying those plastic bags. Like, the weight of those bags can kind of all go on like a specific point, like where your knuckles, meet or something. And it can actually be really painful if it's enough weight and it's over time, right? And like you're sort of like consciously ignoring the pain because you're like, I only have 10 more feet to the refrigerator, right? So I'm going to just keep carrying it. And then you get to the refrigerator and your finger's like white because it hasn't like had blood flow because it's so, it's kind of just, you've been carrying this bag for too long. Well, all the time that you were carrying that bag, your body was, giving you the signal that there's something going on with your, this bag. Your body doesn't know you're carrying a bag. It just knows hurt, hurt, hurt. That signal is there. But if your Damasio's screen is sort of out of whack because traumatic experiences have given you the need to raise that screen to block out even more information because you have a very dysregulated system that can't handle all the input, you would probably carry that bag longer without an awareness that this process of your blood flow being cut off is happening. So that's kind of an example of how important it is to have mind-body connection is, if you're ignoring pain to a much larger degree than a baseline, that can ultimately be a consequential thing. And this is kind of the mechanics of how it happens. And when shutting down becomes a way of life, remember we talked about the different responses to danger. We have fight, flight, and also freeze or shut down. And we also talked about fawning, that kind of social lubricant to sort of stay in a safe space by using, verbal, compliments or apologizing. So there's all these strategies to surviving what comes into our minds as danger. And if we find, shutdown is kind of our go-to. Like if we think about Sherry, she grew up without an advocate in life. So everything she faced, she was on her own, and she was probably always outnumbered, so fight might have been an option initially until you learned it really wasn't, going to turn out well. So shutdown is kind of like an only option for some people. And when you shut down for weeks, months, years of your life, what happens is you start numbing everything out of your body. So not just the discomfort of the trauma, but also the highs, the joy, the creativity, the exuberance of figuring out a problem. Everything becomes like a little bit more flat. And we have the famous song by Trent Reznor and covered by Johnny Cash, Hurt, with the incredible first opening line of I hurt myself today just to see if I still feel. And then I focus on the pain, the only thing that's real. I think that line spoke to a lot of people as a testament to how popular that song is. And at Bridgemakers, we actually explore some of the healing and intriguing processes of music in an event called Music Hop that's on Wednesdays. So if you're ever interested in exploring music and meaning, with friends, it's a cool event. And also some awareness of the self-injury crisis hotline. There's a special number for self-injury and support. And this is where it kind of comes down to the consequences. And welcome, Jose. I'm so glad you could join us as well. Great to see you. Agency. So agency becomes, and when we think about agency, what does that mean? That's like discernment, right? Like you get the choice of what you do with your free will. If your agency is compromised, that's kind of the opposite, where you're controlled, or you don't have a say in the environment or what happens next. So we talked a little bit earlier, I think in chapter 3, about this concept of a watchtower. Like, our brain has a watchtower which can get the 5,000-foot view of a situation. I smell smoke, I see smoke. Is my house burning down, or did I just leave the toaster on? Without a functioning watchtower, or this part of our brain called the medial prefrontal cortex, the MPFC, or the watchtower, without a functioning watchtower, we can't discern, whether something is truly a threat of that magnitude. And, agency is, that's so important to the concept of agency, because if we have an unclear awareness of what's going on in our environment and how important it is to our well-being, if that's murky, where our decision making is also compromised. So this process of trauma, as we went through, chapters 3 and 4, understanding how these brain components sort of get dialed down or exhausted or distracted by this flood of memories that we're struggling to process. As our brain function gets impacted by that process, we lose our watchtower, and then when we can't really make those decisions clearly, that's when agency can get taken away. So this is directly from the book too, and this really caught my attention. So this is coming from the doctor himself. Mindfulness practices strengthen the MPFC. So there's our kind of science mindfulness link. Is that mindfulness practices are very helpful to strengthening and rebuilding and re-engaging with this really important part of our brain that gives us agency and discernment. And he even goes on to quote that he considers it a cornerstone to recovery from trauma. So yeah, really consider looking into mindfulness practices. We have a wonderful mindfulness teacher with us here, Cloud Dragon, that meets up on Saturdays with wonderful VR meditations. And and also beware of McMindfulness, which is a super fun term that's come up in the last 5 years or so, which is, just capitalist corporate America catching up with the trend that people are interested in mindfulness and sort of releasing all of this, books and tools and sessions and seminars. And, you just want to be, cautious of what you go out and sign up for, because it could be just what we call this McMindfulness, which is, branded for collecting fees, so to speak, on people's desire to learn mindfulness. So a really great place to start is a group called Mindfulness VR that is, in VR chat and hosts weekly, I think maybe even daily VR meditations. And it's a great introduction by very well-meaning people for mindfulness practice. And there's also no better way to do it than socially. That's a great way to get introduced than to try to read a book and sit down by ourselves and understand and learn what meditation is. It's really nice to do it with a group. So what happens when we lose our sense of agency? Our, brain functions are compromised. We're losing the ability to understand threat versus non-threat. We're reacting in, unpredictable ways, and it creates vulnerability. If you have a loss of agency, you become very vulnerable, and the constant need to shut down it trains the body to ignore sensation. So you lose awareness that you're cold. Why am I having trouble falling asleep? And maybe it's because I don't have enough blankets, but I don't know that because my spidey sense is compromised. I'm not really clearly getting the signal that I could use to warm up. Ignoring hunger. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago with the question that came up about, work. Is it advisable to kind of turn on my trauma response so that I can focus and power through a work situation? Well, what happens when we trigger ourselves for productivity is we lose, the self-care kind of side of ourselves, like needing to go to the bathroom or eating. We go through those 16-hour work days where we don't leave our chair, and sure, we might have won employee of the month, but what kind of harm did we do to our body? And some really heavy consequences can be, using drugs and alcohol to kind of supplement the muted feelings in life. To kind of bring those extremes in to feel something with controlled substances. Also, the constant external reassurance, that can be a coping mechanism. If you've dialed your senses down, for survival, it can be really empowering to have somebody in your environment that's constantly reassuring or supporting. But the difficulty there is it's hard to find sustainable situations. People can be supportive to a large degree, but sometimes only short term, due to circumstances or stuff coming up in their life. So it's hard to rely on that. And seeking it to like a degree of an addiction, can also compound difficulties. So like people pleasing and looking for fishing for compliments to kind of hit that target, can ultimately kind of complicate the healing experience. But gosh, this is the one that's really rooted into a lot of troubles, is when you have a compulsive compliance with the wishes of others. This is the most vulnerable state where, people who don't always have the highest moral obligations, might take advantage of somebody whose nervous system is compromised. I can give an example of this. Back when I was in college, I don't know why I remember this so clearly, but I was walking to a bus to kind of get back to campus from a satellite auditorium, where the class was held, and two people came up to me and asked for money. And I was like, no, I'm just going to the bus. But they really like kind of almost cornered and pressured me. And I caved. I gave them money because I just kind of went into that shutdown mode. And I did this compulsive compliance with the wishes of others. And when I gave them the money, they both laughed. And apparently they had bet each other whether or not they could get money from me. And they walked away laughing. And I don't really hold much emotion other than a memory of that situation, because now I sort of understand the mechanics of what happened. Like, they took advantage of my vulnerability before I had a chance to heal, and whatever. Maybe they bought each other a Starbucks or something. No harm done. It's just a memory at this point, but it's an example. Like, I really should have just walked away, but I didn't have that level of discernment yet. So if we become aware of these processes of having a compromised awareness because our mind-body connection has, had some interruptions, due to things that happened outside of our control, there's some tips here to kind of reactivate. And, these weren't in chapter 6 so much, but they kind of come up throughout the book. So I thought I'd throw them in here because it seems like a good place to think about how do we sort of restore that connection between our mind and our body. One thing is massage. Getting the adjustments and breaking up the muscle fascias and helping with realignment. That feeling and getting in touch with being touched can be a big empowering move towards reconnecting the mind and body connection, and also doing it with intention. I think intention is another part of the equation where I'm getting massage to reinvigorate my awareness of my brain and my body conversation. I want to start getting back in touch with what my body's saying, and go into a massage with that intention. And or join a choir. Do you enjoy singing? A choir would kick me out. I'm just going to be honest. But if you have the talent and the drive for it, being in a group, creating all of those vibrations together. Like, vibration is another key aspect of the brain-body connection, because your brain and your body have like a unified awareness that there's this energy, and there's a lot of science, behind it, much more than just like the common sense layer there. But I think that's why drumming is kind of looked at as another kind of therapeutic group activity, is the sounds and the vibrations and the feelings of drumming, but also just doing something as a group. That can be a big signal to the nervous system that I've kind of turned the corner and I'm ready to start heading in a healing direction, because I'm doing something safe with a group that's for the purpose of healing. I found this wonderful YouTube video today where this yoga instructor just has a dance that its purpose is to strengthen the mind-body connection. So kind of these really expressive like dance moves that, it's nobody's looking, right? You're in your living room. you can close the shades and stuff and get in touch with your body, move it in the way that the instructor shows you, and feel what that feels like. But also mindful listening. This is an interesting thing, is like we talked about the grocery bag example. Practice like learning practice listening to your body's signals. Like, your body is telling you that the grocery bags are too heavy, like my fingers are starting to hurt. But because of our sort of numbed down, shut down mind-body breakage, we're not really processing that signal. Like, we're able to ignore it through Damasio's screen, or we just don't feel it. Maybe our hands don't feel quite like they used to. But what you can do is, when you set the grocery bags down and you notice like, oh, my finger had been cut off, blood flow for a little bit there, you can start to build an intention. Like, next time I want to hear my body tell me that sooner. I want to hear, and maybe even if I'm only 2 steps away from the refrigerator, I honor my body and set it down. Like, my finger still hurts, but I didn't go as far as those two more steps to the refrigerator. I honored, what my body was telling me. And in a sense, you told your body is important to you. And that's a huge message to send to your body, to regain that communication and trust. And it's really amazing when it turns on. You'll be surprised what your body's telling you that you might have not been hearing, or not have been able to hear. And Peter Levine and Pat Ogden were 2 more of Dr. Vanderkolk's colleagues that were kind of studying similar parts of Chapter 6. And, here's what they said as their kind of checklist for reclaiming agency in the body, draw out sensory information that has been blocked and frozen by trauma. So what I find interesting about this one is we kind of talked about TRE, which is if you think about the animal kingdom, if an animal plays dead that was under attack and in threat of being eaten, but the predator walks off, the animal sort of comes back to life and sort of shakes it off. Like they almost shake like you would think they were in the Arctic and didn't have a coat. They're violently shaking. Their whole nervous system is like evacuating the experience before they move on to what they're doing next. And as humans, we've sort of found a way to not do that. Like we just hold it in, and it manifests in like tension in our muscles. And there's this process of TRE that I've kind of made a commitment to explore myself, which is sort of exercising to the purpose of making your body tremble a little bit to try to like get those feelings like out of your muscles and bones. And I'm curious about it, so I want to try it. Can't hurt. Help patients befriend their energies released by inner experience. Now, this is a big one. This is another sentence where there's a lot condensed into, a few words put together. Because what is being said here, and I think this comes up in Bridgemakers a lot, is that, life isn't always comfortable. Like, the healing process can bring feelings out, like anger, sadness, rage, more of the kind of topics that we hit in the music hop, where we explore songs that are about these emotions. And, one of the skills to the healing process is learning to find comfort in those feelings, that it's okay to be angry about something. We can sometimes be conditioned by parental or authority figures to bury our emotions that are inconvenient to them. Some of those emotions can be like anger. We can not feel like we have permission to be angry. But anger is an important feeling. It's an important feeling to healing, but also you want to practice some mastery over feeling it, because it's a very powerful and reactive emotion. But I love the way they said it, right? Like they said all of that in this one sentence. Help patients befriend the energies released by inner experiences. And then ultimately complete the self-preserving physical actions that were thwarted when they were trapped or restrained or immobilized by terror. So these are the actions that are trapped in our body that were stored there for when we finally get safe and we can release them. Now, that doesn't mean like you have to reenact like getting mugged in an alleyway, like you would have gave them the left hook and the right hook that you just learned. It doesn't mean that. It's like we talked about the drum circles, right? Like putting the energy of that memory and processing that memory and the anger and the sadness and the shame through motion, and that motion allowing you to reconnect your body back to your mind, because now you're safe. So that's a big part of it that I've learned, is like overcoming the shame in the shutdown process. Sometimes in life we have to shut down to survive, and sometimes we have to do that for an indefinite period. So much so that it rewires like how our body works, and that can come with a lot of shame. That's one of the interesting experiences of healing is as you heal, your spirit like gets strong enough to start taking account of what happened. And when that starts happening, you can have feelings that want to push, us back into our shell because it's uncomfortable. We talked about discomfort, things like I shouldn't have allowed myself to be taken advantage of. Why did I say that? I should have stayed. The very last one's personal to me because I discovered that I had an inner voice that I wasn't hearing because my brain and my body were disconnected in this way. And I actually remember it really clearly. I was in the vegetable aisle in a grocery store, and I'm sure everybody's experienced this, like a carrot rolled off the shelf and went down and fell on the ground. And it's embarrassing, right? Because you don't know, should I put the carrot back or do I just leave it there and then everybody judges me because I didn't do something about it? But did I put a dirty carrot back for people to take? But when that carrot hit the floor, there was a voice in my head that said, "You always do this." And I heard it and I was like, "Whoa, what was that?" And the thing is that it was always there. This judgmental voice of every time I did something that kind of triggered my body as a response that shouldn't have happened, or I should have prevented that. This kind of voice came up and asserted itself that you did that. And once I had an awareness of that, I started to practice it out of my experience. I became like an advocate for myself. So the voice would still come up. It would still say what it's going to say. But I started interjecting and saying, "Now wait a minute. I didn't knock that carrot down. It just happened. I just happened to be there." And over time, I reversed that story now to where if I, drop a glass and spill water on the floor, I'm not really hearing that voice, but I know if I still was, I would be my own advocate and say, now wait a minute, because if you had a childhood where, you were sort of pointed out in this behavior and this kind of controlling, narcissistic, environment, you sort of get programmed and you beat everybody to the punch. And when something bad happens, there's a voice inside that can self-blame. And if you gain an awareness of it, that's when you can start challenging it and really coming out of that thought process. So that's a part of my personal experience where I'd just like to say this, that, everything you've done or didn't do was necessary to search for a safe place to heal. And I'm going to say that again because if you've been through certain traumas, one of the things you can do is sort of reflect permissions away or compliments. You sort of have these shields up. And I think this is one that can sometimes be hard to get through the shields. So I'm just going to read it again. Everything you have done or didn't do was necessary to the search for a safe place to heal. So I really hope that you find that place and consider taking this as a permission to set that intention to get started. It's a really rewarding process. It's ups and downs, but it's just really super worth it. And I really credit this book to sort of getting that process started for myself. And today's inspiration for the day is feeling is healing and healing is feeling. And with that, let's go ahead and take things into some open discussion. The floor is open if you have thoughts on chapter 6 or anything that came up in the presentation. And yeah, it looks like great. We got Hey up on the board first. Share away.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of power in what you shared today, and thank you for your vulnerability in describing your own trauma healing. One of the things that stood out is that how gently you pointed out that when people are mutilating their bodies, they are missing the words. So it's turning into a physical expression. The unspeakable things, I think, were the keywords you used there. And I think that's such a good frame to hold around self-harm. I often describe it to people like it's you put a creature in a cage for long enough, it'll start to eat its own body. And even though we can't see the cage around this human being, it doesn't mean it's not there. And this is the expression of what that feels like. And there's a movement for young teens. I don't know if you've heard about this, called the Butterfly Project, I think, where teens who were considering cutting themselves were given Sharpie, rainbow Sharpie markers to where the place of the cut would be. They would use the Sharpies to draw a butterfly. And every time they had the impulse to cut, there would be another butterfly drawn wherever they wanted to cut. And so it was a really interesting bridge for teens to express their distress, but do it in a way that eventually would wash off and tell that story of transformation from the pain they're experiencing by allowing that creativity to be expressed as a semi-permanent, like a short-term tattoo of sorts. So it just feels like a symbolic way that what you're sharing today is the practice. It's the practice of turning that numbing or that wounding into something that can take flight and feel sun and feel inspiration.
Oh, that's really cool. And thanks for going, straight into one of the really intense areas of chapter 6, which was on the topic of self-harm. Because, trauma and PTSD are sinister in those ways that they're not only isolating, but they're kind of like invisible. Like you can function to the point that you can outwardly appear like you have your life together, but inside you're fighting urges to cut your own body. And why I'm so appreciative of the group here is, like, the more we open up about these explainable human experiences, the more those kinds of things can happen. Like, draw a butterfly, on your body instead of cut. And I can also see the group synergy of something like that. Like, what the butterfly means. So it's very powerful and impactful, but also providing like an alternative to in a way that's less detrimental. That's a wonderful story.
I've known parents who had kids who they were doing this with, and they would create different rituals of how to greet somebody who had drawn butterflies on, so they would know what to ask, basically. But often it went something to the lines of, "Tell me this butterfly's story." And so you could make the story about this creature that had landed on your body but was not you. And I think there's something lovely about weaving that storytelling and vibration out. It happened to the butterfly, not to me, but it landed on me because it understood.
Aw. Yeah, that's a great example of like an emotional jujitsu, where you turn this like problematic, trauma-driven behavior like into the process of a getting back in touch. What a lovely thing to empower somebody's creativity, completely turn the story on its head. That's wonderful. Yeah, I'm almost overwhelmed with how cool that is.
Yeah, thanks for hearing it. These are these little treasures in the trauma path that it feels like I can tell that story 100 or 1,000 times, and it's always so nutritious to parts of me that were shamed or shut down when I had that instinct to curl in or even self-destruct in many ways. And we all have those places where we've been told to put our chins up and stop crying and don't feel your feelings and don't express your feelings outwardly. And so for all those parts of us, even if we don't see it as like a car accident trauma or a kidnapping trauma, those parts of us need those butterflies to remind us where our body is.
Mm. Yeah, I'm so selfishly glad that you have time for these events, because I know that you just have this, really large treasure trove of knowledge in this area. So, I've been secretly hoping that you didn't, get busy to the point where you couldn't make it. But this is a great example of such a cool thing to share, so timely and on point. And great, we got Jimmy up on the board too. And yeah, thanks for attending Music Hop, even though I know it kind of encroached on your sleep time, but it was nice to hang out.
It was totally worth it. So I absolutely loved what Heya said about the cuts and the butterflies. It kind of reminds me how some musical artists will take their pain and make it into something creative. And I can easily imagine people who draw the butterflies maybe going into more elaborate artwork to express that pain. Depending, of course, with their connection to their creativity. I absolutely loved that. One of the things when we were talking about the Damasio screen was the girl's experience with the therapy massage, and when she went down to her heels, I thought the actual words were something. I'm gonna verbatim this, but she yelled out, "I can't find you." And to me, that kind of related to the trauma that maybe she experienced on her vacation in Mexico when she was kidnapped. Maybe she was blindfolded. That could have processed into not knowing where her abductor was in the room, so she never could see the danger coming. And that's how my mind related to the massage. And in that, when she couldn't find the therapist, she knew that someone was around. Also, when you were talking about, by the way, the grocery bag allegory was quite amazing. I love that. If that's yours, hats off. If not, I'm so glad that you shared that. When you were talking about being in the grocery store and dropping the carrot, and you were describing that inner voice, that almost it did remind me of the movie 8 Mile, where in the last rap battle, Eminem is telling his competition all of his flaws right there on the front. And it's pretty much disarming the competition, the guy that he's going up against. It's almost like a way that he is telling on himself so that no one outside of himself can hurt him. It's almost like, well, it's not as bad if I bring it up myself. It would hurt a lot more if someone said, "Why'd you drop that freaking carrot?" You know? So I'm wondering, without any proof, without any kind of evidence, just a thought, if maybe we do that to ourselves because we fear being hurt by other people from it. Otherwise, very, very interesting chapter. I liked it. I liked it quite a bit. Admittedly, life kind of got in the way and I didn't have time to read all of it. But I found, I want to call her Sarah. I found her story very, very heartfelt, very tragic. And I hope nobody ever has to go through something like that. Thank you for the space to letting me express that.
Yeah, that's really good insight that I think keyed me in, and also, you know, members of the group. Like, I didn't really stop to think that that could have been a flashback experience. I took in the information of the loss of feeling in the feet, but yeah, you went the extra mile. She was probably, you know, back in that Florida hotel room, you know, in a complete trauma flashback. Amazing, you know, to think. I love the Eminem reference too. You know, there's a fine line between self-deprecation and just awareness and acceptance of your own flaws. And I think like the moment in the movie represents, you know, not only cleverly winning the rap battle, but owning, you know, this self-awareness of what things I have about myself that aren't strong, but, you know, that comes from a place of courage because you know what you are. You finally learned what you are strong at. So, yeah, I think self-deprecation can be kind of a form of fawning because it's a strategic way to sort of lower your presence and kind of stay out of that danger zone. But a self-awareness of your flaws and being willing to like have them just openly on display, yeah, that's next level, you know, kind of healing practice type of work, because, you know, that's what I was talking about with the comfort level in our own skins. It's like, it's a tragedy that we finally get comfortable in our own skins when we sort of past our prime, like our physical prime. You know, we're older and wiser, and we're happier, you know, for it. But man, oh man, I wish I could go back, you know, into my 20s with this comfort level, and, you know, still have the energy and the time scale to just go around the world and stuff. But yeah, I sort of went sideways on your comments, but yeah, if those little inklings of awareness of inner voices can be super powerful, because I think the awareness is like that first step of then being able to set an intention to like get in front of it and build a new voice, you know, like build a new program that mitigates it a little. And great. Yeah, we got Carl up next for your share. Thanks for raising your hand. And welcome, Rain, too. I'm glad that you came in.
Welcome, yeah. As usual, I have lots of thoughts listening, and then when I open my mouth, I kind of just got to wing it and see what comes out. But one thing that did really strike me from this chapter, the idea of the, like, folks with traumatic backgrounds that, I forget the like acronym that was used, but it was like default neural state when they were checking, you know, against quote unquote normal folks that hadn't had trauma, and seeing that lack of like personalization, and it made me kind of notice, like, just people around me at work, you know, people I've known throughout life, that made me kind of reevaluate a little bit of maybe somebody who I would have just thought was, you know, not a very, I mean, putting it bluntly, not a very like smart person, not a very, you know, active mind, engaged type person, but that could be, you know, not something that's, you know, just inherent to their self as a person, but something that is a result of, you know, something that could have happened in their past. Or even thinking with, you know, my own wife, who is I'd say a lot less generally engaged in things. If I just randomly ask her, like, what you thinking, it's like nothing. And I'm like, yeah, bullshit. But you know, perhaps, you know, there is that just blankness that I kind of don't buy because I don't get it. You know, I don't have that brain state at all. I think it was referred to at that point in the book. He said something along the lines of like a normal mind is a storm or a flurry of activity, and I mean that's pretty much my default state. I know, and so just made me reevaluate a little bit. And of course, my dog wants out as soon as I'm talking again. Made me reevaluate the judgments I've made on some people, which I do always try to, keep those judgments in mind as what they are, just a snapshot with very limited information from the, what my senses are picking up. But even more so realizing that like how flawed those perceptions can be. Just making judgments about people without having really any idea what's going on in their head. And all these, the brain is so complex that we tend to think our snap judgments are pretty accurate, but the more and more I learn about how the mind works and stuff, how different people's minds works really, because while there are patterns, it just seems like every case is so unique really when you delve down into it. So just trying to be mindful of, that everyone is that, universe unto themselves. We contain multitudes. You have no idea what somebody's been through. So, I mean, and just to cap it off, that was the one kind of anecdotal thing I was thinking of. I actually kind of scolded a coworker, not so much in like an angry way or anything, but like I've been in management and stuff in the past, even though I'm not now. So we have a guy who's like a younger guy, and he wore a hat that it was like a Smash Brothers reference, something about like if this person who nobody knows doesn't pull off this move, I will kill myself. And it was just like across the top of a baseball cap. And I'm like, that's kind of a shitty thing to wear to work, regardless of the joke or whatever behind it. And he's like, oh, you don't get the joke. And I'm like, well, that's beside the point. You don't know, just somebody. Like, I mean, just in general, I really hate how the whole suicidality basically became a meme in like the last 10 years. It's just very flippantly referred to. So just that same idea of like, you don't know, just seeing that reference to somebody that's in a really shitty mind state, or like if that's their default state, they could be just constantly referring back to that when they're not, actively doing something. Their mind goes back to thinking about a traumatic suicidal experience or something, and then they see that on your hat, and it's like, thanks, you put me back there instantly, just with that, your baseball cap that you thought was a funny meme. So, all right, I'm done rambling now, I think.
Oh, it's a good ramble. I mean, you're welcome to add. You don't want to cut yourself off there.
Yeah, I believe I got everything that was bouncing around there out.
What was coming to mind with me with the baseball hat situation is like the opposite of mindfulness, right? The mindlessness of just a lack of awareness of how your actions and decisions like affect others. I get why people are like, oh, why are you so uptight about it? But at the same time, it's like, there needs to be some line of tastefulness, like that is like a universal truth. But yeah,
that does. Actually, I'll cap off my thoughts there with one of my phrases that I like the second half of that people don't always say, and I know Ruth's heard me say this one before, but the whole golden rule thing, treat other people the way you would want to be treated. I think a lot of people like end it there, and that can be kind of misinterpreted as, well, if I don't care, then they shouldn't care. Like if I'm okay with being called a bitch, I'll call everybody a bitch, and it should be okay. And it's like when the exercise there is empathy. Treat other people the way you'd want to be treated if you were them. You need to imagine their experience, imagine what's going to, upset or bother them, and put yourself in that situation. So the idea of just, projecting your own self on everybody else is the opposite of the point there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, really, that's resonating with me. It's a really great way to describe it, because it's like, I get when, and I'm proud of people that take like an ownership of their like authentic self. But that attitude of like, I am just the way I am and like, you just got to deal. Like, if you're behaving in a way that I have to deal, like, I don't know if that's really like a healthy, dynamic. And if I can't set a boundary, because, you just refuse, like, I don't know if that's, like kind of like a self-determination, I'm struggling for the words for it. Like, taking like your space in life, like I just am who I am, and independent of like how you feel about that. Like, I don't really know where the line is there, because you want people to be themselves, but if it's like harmful to relationships, like I feel like that needs work. Like, I personally feel like that's something to work on, and not just like draw a line in the sand and be like, well, you don't get me then. I think that's all up for debate.
You like, sure, that's fine, but and then you got to accept that it's up to people whether they want to deal with you. So don't be surprised if folks just don't mess with you. Like, you're like, well, I don't like them and they don't care, so I will no longer.
Right. Yeah, like, I am who I am, it's my way or the highway, but then don't complain like if you don't have things to do after work, because nobody really wants to hang out. That's I think another awareness thing. Like, I think sometimes people can lack the awareness or overcommit to that lifestyle, like to their own detriment, without really like a full I think it's kind of a different healing path, because I think I can admit, like, when I was back in I want to say like in my early 30s, I went through a trolling phase on the internet where I intentionally made comments like for reaction and like YouTube videos and stuff, and like,
can we see those?
It was I don't know if they're still around. I would probably be very embarrassed, but I mean, for science, I would bring them up again. But the reason I'm bringing it up as an example is, like, it's easy to judge when someone's being in a way that's like difficult to be around. It's triggering, or it's uncomfortable, or bad taste, and you just want to tell the person, like, can you stop? Like, but at the same time, it's like they could be on a path where that's like the behavior they need to express, which is trying to ultimately get to that same space. Now, that's not a blank check to like cause a bunch of harm. You got to draw the line somewhere. But somebody being kind of, for lack of a better term, like what most people would describe as like a jerk, can sometimes be like their path to healing, oddly enough. And I don't really know where I was going with that thought.
It is funny you say that, because, well, I can kind of continue it, because it did take me to a spot that I have kind of been avoiding of, but I've been kind of at odds with my lifelong best friend, just because he's kind of fallen into this whole why is everything so woke and they're pushing the agenda and kind of crap, and I'm just like checked out. I haven't talked to him in like 8 months now. And kind of thinking of it in that phrase of, I have been in the boat of like, well, what could I say to fix this? How can I fix him, rather than, just looking at it as, perhaps he needs to take that time to go down that path that I see as wrong and find those answers himself, hopefully. But it is, I think that, like you said earlier, it's to their own detriment, right? Like, it ultimately, I think those of us here can kind of agree that interconnection with other people is kind of the simple overall answer, right? Like, you're not going to get better, improve yourself, sit alone in your own head, So ultimately, if a person doesn't believe that themselves, like, they kind of got to come to that conclusion on their own. Like, you can't really just tell somebody like you're kind of a jerk. You need to be nice to people. It'd be better for you. Like that's never going to work. But ultimately, I think that's the goal, is for folks to kind of get that realization. And then, if they are, tying it back to the book here, if it is something that they truly have, issues, traumatic issues, or just, whatever needs addressed, to get professional help, or just, being social and socializing with people to have a kind of happy, healthy mind, like whichever extreme it is, ultimately, like, you need to connect with people and like doing it, like have a good time.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for your comment, because it kind of solidified like my feelings on it too, which is if that is like a healing path, and it kind of overtly being a troll, in physical space, not just an anonymous keyboard warrior that I was, but like in life, right? Wearing provocative t-shirts, to get reactions out of people. If you ultimately do choose a healing path, like the unfortunate part of that is that you're probably going to start from a place of being pretty isolated, because you can, push people out of your life with your own behaviors. And like you said, being connected to others, like as Dr. Vanderkolk says numerous times in the book, is like a really important part of coming out of trauma. So yeah, that's a really difficult way to navigate it, because if you push the others out of your life, when you get to the point where you're like, I am ready to heal, it's like, oh, you're starting, from a really lonely starting line.
Yeah. I see we've prompted some more thoughts, though. There's hands.
Oh, great. Yeah, thanks for the awareness to the board there. So yeah, Ruth, we got Ruth's hand up on the board. That shakes some things up for you?
Yeah, well, it's funny you both went there. Carl often remarks that feels like his brain is being externalized into people. And I was actually going to mention working with trolls and interviewing them over a year. And I think one of my aha moments in that study with both ex-trolls and advanced, almost career level trolls that were in charge of really big communities of trolls. And then there were early trolls who had not been trolling long, and there's a lot of cringe and awkwardness and kind of old ways of stereotyping that they were using to kind of begin. One of the aha moments is how often, when we went back to the first trolling experience where they realized they were trolling, they were not trying to provoke a negative reaction. They were just trying to provoke any reaction. And listening to this, I think about that numbness that sets in when our environment is not reflecting or mirroring us back in a way that tells us we have permission to feel our feelings. The majority of the trolls I talked to, and also when I asked trolls, what is the age demographic? What do you think the gender even demographic of trolls are? Most ascribed trolling to young men who are either teens or late teens. And I think about the emotional blackout that men are subjected to, where emotions are punished, and how much that could lead to a place of incredible numbness and a lack of practice with mere emotional responses that help us bring our systems back into alignment. And so, yeah, something about this kind of just made me think about it all as a really tragic trauma response to try to get you to feel something and see my effect on you. As a keyboard warrior, I don't necessarily see that effect. Maybe I see some angry emojis, or I get somebody to react really with vitriol or whatever, but I don't feel those emotions from you necessarily the way that I would in VR, where I can see you hurt, I can see you run, And when you were talking earlier about the difficulty saying no and that instinctual pleasing piece, I've been watching some videos lately of a common trolling practice in VR chat, which is for trolls to group up together and take on uniform troll identities like fish or little creatures and go in and swarm a person and repetitively make the same noise or the same question as a group of up to 10. Yeah. So that's one of the groups, right? And watching these videos and watching how people respond to it, it's kind of, I have a guilt response just watching a video on it because it feels like I'm watching a crime to some degree, especially the groups that are perpetuating racism as a form of play, I guess, if we can say it like that. So it's pretty disturbing to watch how quickly people collapse in themselves and just start to run or shut down and to realize what that would feel like to be them, and how often these groups will polarize. So they will pick somebody in the space to be not good enough and vilify and abuse, and then they'll pick somebody else to adore and glorify and uplift, while also trying to get them to conform and resemble their group avatars, to join their movement. And so there's, from the social scientist end, I'm like, oh my God, I feel so gross looking at this to some degree, because this is not a consenting relationship process, but it's also all over the web, and it has gathered a lot of interest, right? That it's like humans are discovering what cavemen knew and never forgot, right? Of just the peer pressure to provoke a feeling in someone, and not looking for the consequence of that long term, just getting the relief of being able to predict a feeling and then see it happen. I mean, it's a very rudimentary way for us to reset ourselves and know we can cause something reliable in another, even if it is rage.
Yeah, and thanks for recognizing that kind of like male slanted experience too, where it's kind of frowned upon to put emotions out. Like, I can say from experience, back in grade school, if you showed emotions, you were going to get, chastised by your group at best. At worst, you were going to get, a couple of shots to the arm for daring to express, some kind of emotion that wasn't sarcasm. And I'm so interested now in the connection between that and trolling, like this desire to provoke, like create an environment that's now safe to have extreme emotions, but kind of like for these really warped reasons, right? Like, it's kind of like the UFC. I've always joked that the UFC is just a constructed way for men to publicly hug each other, disguised as beating the tar out of one another. And don't get me wrong, I love the UFC. It's I really like to keep up on it and stuff. But I often wonder about that, like how that kind of childhood upbringing of like processing emotions out of social situations like sort of leads to a form of dysfunction, right? Like, in a way, is it kind of like a self-harm type of behavior? You're creating these harmful emotions because they've been so restrained for so long. It's really interesting to think about it in the terms of like what's coming through the book. Oh, I think you're on mute. I see some talking gestures, but I don't hear you.
Sorry. What I was saying is I've heard from people, and I've also had some experience in de-escalating trolls, which includes a mirroring of acknowledging and appreciating the intent of creating humor or some kind of reaction, but then also resetting repeatedly So it's switching from synchronous communication, where I'm about to laugh at whatever you're going to show me, and we're having a fun time. And then also resetting to asynchronous communication of when the troll is becoming really exaggerated or out there, anchoring back down and stop mirroring that and ask a deeper question, another question to kind of bring them back. And that process of looping them back into themselves works within sometimes seconds too. And I've ex-trolls, or what I call heart ninjas, have sent me videos showing how quickly they're able to get trolls out of that mind state and still have vulnerable feelings with them. But it's just in an alignment dance instead of I will have somebody feeling my uncomfortable feelings, even if it does harm, which is kind of the default place in that trauma zone.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it can be a form of like getting stuck, because it's like there's no real awareness of the need to and that lack of awareness and that not seeking the deeper meaning in it, means that it just perpetuates. You're kind of stuck in a loop. So that's important work.
Yeah. Thank you for talking about trolling. I think that when we disassociate from that part of us that I think in its most innocent form is the trickster inside, we create more division ultimately, because we're rejecting that part of us. So then we reject that in each other, and it just leads to more chaos in the end.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, that concept of us all just kind of crashing into each other. Our traumas just ricocheting back and forth.
It's a really good movie, by the way, if you haven't seen it. Crash.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that won a few Oscars back in the day, I think. That was pretty well received.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. I got Jimmy's hand up on the board, too. Did some stuff come up from our chat there? We went a lot of directions.
Yeah, this came up when you were talking with Carl, and we were talking about how jerks may be needing to be a jerk in that moment. Originally, I was thinking that maybe they weren't reading the room correctly, and if you were to just say, "Hey, I understand that you want to be very interactive and love that," but and then that kind of went into the diversity of thought, how much I really treasure different viewpoints, and even conflicting ideologies can hold some value, much in the same way that we wouldn't be able to recognize the light if there weren't dark. But then my mind floated into toxic masculinity, and I couldn't really come up with any rational, wise speech that could hold value, because then we would have to go off into hate speech. And without it getting too convoluted, I decided that I really don't have a follow-up opinion that would be of value other than just to explain the thought process of how I came up with it having no value. So I have to retract that. And I do have some coworkers with different political ideologies, even to the point of conspiracy theories, that I do have to just pretty I disengage those thoughts. Like, hey, this is my internal voice speaking, but I know they have different viewpoints, but the place is much healthier for me if I just concentrate on the work and see them as a person disregarding that viewpoint. And that may even kind of give a false thought about who they are, which isn't very honest with myself, but it can make for a better work environment if I decide that. I guess that would be one of those times where blocking out something might actually be healthy and not quite on the side of trauma. Again, there's always a conflicting viewpoint to every viewpoint that is brought up, and even though we don't have to talk about it, but if you want to bring out some of the flaws in that thought process, I am open to it, because it helps me clarify this convoluted process that sometimes I have. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a really deep share, because especially with people in our environment, in that way, you know, like a co-worker, you know, which is a relationship where there are consequences if it goes in a direction that's difficult to come back from. So that's a high consequence place to put feedback. You know, do you hold your reaction and keep the peace, or do you set a boundary and kind of start? And I keep thinking of the term that you used, Ruth, at the music hop last night, which was creating not only safe spaces but brave spaces, where we you know, kind of tiptoe into that honest feedback layer, you know, not for the purpose of harming, like, you know, we talked about trolling and stuff, you know, kind of let me send this back your way kind of communication, but like maybe I don't know, is there a soft way to kind of tell somebody, like, maybe you should research what you're talking about a little bit further? I don't know the language or the mental jujitsu for that situation.
You're kind of asking a question that I put my hand up there, and that my response kind of is going into that, so I could kind of just jump in here. Because what Jim was saying, kind of the thoughts, you know, you were going through, kind of similar to mine again. And as like Ruth pointed out, I love when people kind of, you know, voice the things that I'm like, that's an interesting thought, and then somebody else is having that exact thought over there. But I am often, you know, trying to fix things, trying to think hypothetically what, like I said, with my best friend I haven't talked to, is like, what could I say that would get the point across, that, you know, convince him that I don't like that, or, you know, he's on the wrong mindset about it. And it really, like, I find that more often than not, it's going to be the seeds, right? The little, like, small comments you can make that would just kind of make somebody, or even a non-comment, like Jim was saying about, like, removing yourself from those kind of conspiracy conversations, or, like, I kind of think of the, like, I don't know if it comes to mind for anybody, but the, like, meme of the black guy in the, like, baseball cap that's kind of, like, pursing his lips to the side, kind of giving that look of, like, I don't know. But, like, kind of giving that look and being like, and just walking away when people start saying some silly shit. But when it comes to, like, my friend with the baseball cap, you know, mentioning suicide on it, it's like, I was working with him because I noticed he was kind of struggling on some things, so I wanted to help him, you know, get up to speed better. And so we were able to kind of chat throughout the night, and like, I noticed they had they question mark them exclamation point in the very back of their notebook. So I did ask, like, oh, do you prefer they them? And they said yes. So I might have used he here tonight because that's what I'm used to. This conversation just happened yesterday, but you know, I'm going to make that effort to use they, them with them. And we had a little bit of a conversation on the one break about, you know, folks we know that are trans, or where, you know, kind of where we're at in the community. And they all know I do the VR stuff. So that's like a known thing about me at work. And so I kind of did have a little bit of a thing where I was like, you know, at first I was just like, the hat, not cool. I don't like it, just to kind of get that across. But once we kind of had that little more connection, I didn't go much deeper into it, but I did kind of, was like, the whole like they them thing, that to a lot of people is like a signal of like safety. Like to a lot of people, if you like voice that you're like prefer they them pronouns, a lot of folks are going to see that and just be like, oh, they're cool, putting it real simple like that. But then you turn your hat around and they see that and they're like, oh, never mind. Like kind of conflicting messages there, bud. And he did kind of just like purse his lower lip and nod at that, and then asked me the question like relevant to work as we were working there. Like it wasn't like ignored or anything. Like he kind of seemed to absorb it, and we moved on. And I wouldn't be surprised if I don't see that hat show up again. He's worn a bunch of different hats. So, and I'm hoping that kind of did the trick. Just that little bit of like, safe, not safe, conflicting messages, bub. And even me saying bub there, I'm like, oh wait, that's gendered. But So yeah, I think small pushes, showing people, like even the whole like purse your lips and walk away. Like I hope that somebody who thinks I'm a smart guy will say something that they think is like an insightful idea or whatever it may be, and I'm instantly like, nah, and walk away. They're like, wait, I need to reevaluate that, like because they think that I'm smart, you know what I mean? So hopefully, like, you gotta let them do it on their own, but you gotta have, throw some bombs, plant some seeds.
I've got two things on that, and then I have to go. If I can, just give some micro recommendations there. I like a lot about what Carl is saying. There's something in what you said about caring personally and noticing the details about somebody. When somebody feels like there's something that attracts you to them, they're a lot more open to negotiate the things that repel you from them. And so noticing something about somebody I like, asking a question about it. You're also really good at that, Scott. And then the last piece is often where people get really nervous, but genuinely expressing some level of transparency around the discomfort without judgment, of just saying, when I see that, I feel uncomfortable. And then almost sometimes exaggerating those expressions on the outside so that people see, oh, I'm causing you to feel like you want to push me away by doing this, and allowing them to get curious about why does that repulse you, is usually the general recipe I would invite there, is that the more I can find a question that is so open-ended, there's no right answer, the more that is planting that seed that's going to burrow some roots in and make them have to ask all kinds of questions every time they have the instinct to utilize that kind of tool.
Yeah, a great way to phrase it. And I'm really glad it came up, because I feel like it connects a little bit where we were discussing the pressures that can lead us to those kind of trolling type behaviors, adopting conspiracy theory because we're seeking something. We might not be on the path to get what we're actually seeking, but it's like informing the behavior. And I like Carl's example there, finding something meaningful to connect on, like instead of the triviality of the reactionary language, but something to truly connect, like human to human. And, maybe that will, some people are going to make a lifetime commitment to be in a disturbance, but if they are truly on a path where they would like connection, like opening the door with something real, like what you mentioned, Carl, like I thought that was a huge win. So, oh yeah, Jimmy just put in a note that he had to cut out. We did go long today, and I apologize for that. I'm kind of wondering if I should maybe put like a marker, but we get going on such great topics. So I'll maybe open the door for some feedback on event length in the Discord this week.
You know, it's a great reminder of when the event has hit the time.
Bathroom?
To RSVP shows up.
That when you auto RSVP, as soon as the new event is posted, you will get a DM informing you of such.
That's so great, Carl. Well done. You two are like a comedy skit. Okay. I need to go, so I'm going to turn this stream off, but it was lovely as always. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Yep, heading out.
Yeah, appreciate everyone. Nice to see you, Jose and Anthony.
Gotta crank the audio back up.
Yep.
There we go. I got my normal voice back.
Nice.
Oh, was there a comment there? I not muted the room, but went to the normal volume.
The comment was I needed to raise my volume back up.
Oh, okay.
And now it's really loud again.
Sorry, I thwarted the effort by reacting. Yep. Okay, I'm putting it back down.
Okay. I see. The sloth guy whose name I'm missing right now, but when
oh, that's Jose.
Jose, yeah. I hate that didn't come to mind for me. I'm mad at myself.
Yeah.
There we go. Moving mode.
Saw Astral come in, but yeah, no, thanks for coming in. Always nice to see you. Oh, no worries. Yeah, that's why we have weekly events, so if you miss one, it's always nice. My body's falling apart because I don't Oh, no. Well, yeah, I mean, no harm there. Yeah, doesn't feel right. No obligations or pressure. Okay. Yeah, we were going to do the chapter 10, but, just a moment. I forgot to turn the stream off, too. I got to jump out of headset real quick to stop that.